Higher the levels, bigger the devils. The more humans, the more operators, the more clients, the more chance you have of someone being offended by your business, or your service. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. Welcome to you if you're in YouTube land. My name's Max Peterson. I am your host. I'm also the CEO at Smith & Sons Remodeling Experts here in Canada, and it's great to have you along. As usual, we want to be able to bring you guys and gals value. If you're in the contracting game, if you're a general contractor or a contractor, a lot of this information will actually flow over. So wanting to obviously give you something to take away immediately. Quick housekeeping, obviously like and share and subscribe, and maybe leave us some comments and some daps maybe. Really appreciate the love that I get, certainly on the social platforms. It's awesome. So let's get cracking. Don't forget, you can contact me and just shoot me an email at max@businessforbuilders.ca. I would enjoy helping out wherever I can. And certainly help you build a high-performance building company. That is the name of the game. All right, today we are going to talk about dispute handling. I guess, as one of the sayings that we use, or one of the episodes that we put out was higher the levels, bigger the devils. I got that. I heard that saying from my old man first, and it's super true, because I think as we whilst we maintain control, the chances of confusion or misrepresentation or misunderstanding is greatly reduced, because it's very one-to-one. There's not a lot of chances for there to be grey area developed, or that misunderstanding to be undertaken. So whilst you're a one-man band, I tell you what, the smallest fish can be the sweetest. So I wouldn't underestimate that. If I make more money or I have a bigger business, I'll be happier, because you may be disappointed in finding out that it's a lot more burden to bear than what you think. So part of a developing business is going to be obviously the system development, which is very much a hands-on approach to ensuring that everything that happens within your business is systemized, and it contains all kinds of explanations about how certain things are done. And it certainly does, maybe include checklists and things like that. That's all super important. But to then, what you then got to do is recruit good talent. You've got to bring in good folks to help you run the business. And so anytime that you involve humans, and of course, going back to if you are a one-man band and you're only working at one client at a time, the chances of you fumbling the ball or an oversight or a mistake is a lot less of a chance than, let's say, if you had a system which should protect you for the most part, but it's not a perfect science, and then you've got more people involved, and then you've got more clients. The chances of you upsetting another human, it's highly likely. And so what we're going to chat a little bit about is, I'm not sure that it's going to be, I'm not going to give you every single step of the way. I think, I think that, as much as self-awareness is a major contributor to our success, it's a massive variable. Those that have high self-awareness improve or increase their chances of success, and those that aren't self-aware are just, could be deemed a little bit arrogant and really it doesn't serve their purpose long-term to just maintain this, being oblivious to everything that's happening around them, and they just kind of just forge on like they're always right. Sort of reminds me of Adolf Hitler a little bit. He was a little, at the end of the game, he was quite delusionary and didn't really understand what was happening. So we don't want to be like that. And so what I'm going to try and give you is some really basic, 5 points, a bit of an overview perhaps, of what I think that you might want to consider as a process. And it's both external and it's internal at the same time. It really does. Dispute handling can be very, let's say, offensive to the builder, because it's like, I don't believe I'm being accused of this. What the heck? Why is that? Why are they saying these things about me? And of course, in this wonderful age of technology where, social media allows, certain people to be able to sort of go and put together profiles or, have situations where they can just make derogatory comments rather than dealing with the facts or, prematurely losing their mind, which is their prerogative, just by the way. So this is why, we want to be very, solution-oriented. We don't really want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. So let's get cracking. 5 points to better dispute handling activity. The first one is breathe. Really just, set the tone in your own mind. Like I said, it's very offensive that someone could come to us and accuse us of, not doing this or not doing that, or there's an oversight. And so I think what can happen is, and you've heard me say this before, that if the emotion goes up, your ability to make good decisions goes down. I think it's, no matter what, whether you get a phone call or an email, and we get this constantly because of everything, the way that I just set that out, with which the more humans, the more operators, the more clients, the more chance you have of someone being offended by your business, or your service. It's just a fact. I would love to have, or to be able to deliver perfection across the board, but I'm entrusting as our frontline operators, our general contractors, as they go out each day wearing the Smith & Sons brand, it's almost an inevitability. It would be foolish for me to think that, we will have all wins and no losses, that every time that we have an at-bat that we hit it out of the park. It's just not, it's something that I've had to reconcile in myself, because I come from a background where I've had more of a smaller enterprise where I might have only had a handful of folks to work for, and maybe only one or two humans that would help me, operate the business. Whereas this what I'm doing currently now as CEO at Smith & Sons, where we've got, a half a dozen or a handful of general contractors, and then they have folks working under them who's then serve across the board. Right now, we could be serving as many as 30 clients. I mean, I'm just taking a guess. I actually haven't analyzed that number. But those 30 clients actually have got on board because they really appreciate what the brand can potentially deliver to them. They look at the website and they say, well, that's the experience that I want. That's the outcome that I want. That's why I'm utilizing Smith & Sons. And unfortunately, which it saddens me a lot, is to hear that we don't actually hit the mark perfectly and hit the bullseye every time with every single client. And there is a absolute raft of reasons why things happen. Some things are out of our control, others are not. There's other things that we are directly responsible for as general contractors that we don't deliver to clients the way we should. And there's a whole bunch of things. Communication is probably one of the biggest components of a dispute, or that's at the core of the dispute. Either there wasn't communication properly undertaken in the sales process, in the specification side of things. The worst words that I can hear from a client is, Max, I thought that was included. What that does is that's an indictment against me, saying, well, Max, you didn't do a very good job. And of course, if you did, you can then point them in the direction of the specifications. But if it's not there with a high level of clarity, then you do have a case to answer for. I do have a case to answer for. So I think the first thing is we want to set the tone. We really, that initial punch in the mouth is quite shocking. It's like, I can't believe that I've just got this across my desk now. I think, taking a deep breath, understand that you're going to be able to, that you want to be proactive, not reactive. I think what I find works for me is that I want to immediately stabilize emotionally and really start to think about some of the reasons behind that, which really sets the foundation going forward in the dispute resolution process. I think that too many general contractors will go into defense. And the words I will never use is, it's not my fault. Clients are not interested. They automatically assume it's your fault, bro. And so what you have to do is just know that that's coming. And your defense, it's not my fault. It was out of my control. I couldn't get trades. The supplier cocked up. Whatever the case may be, they are dealing with you. If you're with Smith & Sons, we are a design and build one-stop shop. Everything happens under one roof. Clients love that. The minute that you say, and that means there's one person to contact, there's one go-to guy or gal, okay? The minute that you say, oh, it's not my fault, what you're saying is, actually, you can't depend on me. No longer does the narrative about one-stop shop design and build count. And then all of a sudden, the client now is being emotionally disconnected from that experience of positivity to one that now leads into negativity. So my advice to you, as I advise all of my team, is that the words "it's not my fault" doesn't come out of our mouth, because it's completely irrelevant. And it does undermine your credibility and your authority as a general contractor. And so I think you've got to understand how powerful it is that you set the tone to the point. I think there's got to be a very, very prompt response. Of course, in that response, we don't go and make any kind of, guarantees or promises or anything like that. Because what we have to do is my point number 2. So point number 1 is very much take a deep breath, control your emotions, get them down so that your ability to make good decisions and think with clarity goes up. And the second thing is obviously make an assessment and undertake a report. And so, this really, the last point there is all about, a bit of a debrief. And so really with the end result in mind, and I've talked about starting with the end in mind and reverse engineering, I'm very much from the beginning, I'm saying, right, I am going to gather as much data, good and bad, about the situation. And when I move into point number 5, when I start doing a debrief as to, once we've reached a conclusion, I'm going to start looking at why it happened and what do I do to avoid this happening in the future, because it was a very terrible experience. So, what we want to do is make an assessment, undertake a report. We've got to look at all of the information that's, really that we can access. And in some cases, the dispute might be handled fairly promptly, fairly quickly. In other cases, it might be very long-winded and it might be very elongated, which, is also very stressful. You don't really want to be doing that whilst you're trying to market and sell and, go to contract and build homes or whatever you might be doing. It's very distracting and it really does sap your energy. Okay, so when we make an assessment and a report, what we're not trying to do is win an argument. What we're trying to do is really, assemble the timeline, if you like, and all of the events that took place. So it's super important that you do this categorically and unemotionally, which is why point number 1 is take a deep breath and get those emotions under control. The way that I might do that is go, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario in my assessment? And then I am really reconciled to one or the other or anything in between, which means now what I'm trying to do is just to navigate my way through this dispute and get out the other side, learn from it and move on. So, in some cases there might be very little money at stake. In other cases, there could be hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake. And so, obviously if there is a significant issue where it has to be taken to a third party for arbitration, whether that's, a civil resolution tribunal that's local, that's for maybe, costs under, $5,000, very small stuff, that might be handled via an online tribunal without any major court hearings, which is a fairly cost-effective way to do it. Or alternatively, it could be 6 figures and it's going to need some lawyering up to really come out with a resolution. So obviously to do in-house resolution and try and come to the table and talk about the facts, there's got to be some responsibility taken too, folks. I think at the end of the day, if there is an oversight that in the back of your mind, you're like, I know Max said not to say it's not my fault, but it wasn't my fault. At the end of the day, you've got to start reconciling the issue, what's created you a headache, and what potentially you can do next time round to avoid said headache. And so assessing everything right across the board as to, why is the client coming to me with this? Where did it fall down? What was their expectation? And maybe what are some, potential solutions to remedying or curing the issue? That's some stuff that you'll do. And essentially this assessment happens behind closed doors. It's not in collaboration with the client at this stage. We really want to, no different to, I was going to say FIA. I think it's the FAA. It's the airline authority in the States. Every time there's an aircraft that goes down, it's the FAA. I think, Dom, can you just Google that for me? It's the Federal something Aviation Authority. I think it is FAA now that I think about it. So every time there is an accident involved, they are straight on the scene and they are looking down on the situation, trying to evaluate what's happened. You need to be your building company or your contracting company's equivalent of the franchise of the Federal Aviation Authority in the States. Administration, sorry, not authority, administration. Federal Aviation Administration. And so, you've got to be that. You've got to go there and just look at the, what is happening, assess the damage as it is right there and then. And then, of course, you can take that back to your office and you can start to talk to some team and do some interviews, no different to what the FAA would do with pilots and maybe witnesses of the accident, things like that. I think at that point, what you might need to do is there might be, and you've heard me say, possibly you've heard me, there's a famous video on TikTok where I've talked about, you don't have to apologize. Well, in the event that there is a cock up and the client is making a hoo-ha and you are in dispute handling or dispute resolution mode, I would say in this case, potentially an apology would definitely be in order. So for the record, I am all about an apology as long as it's relevant and as long as it's not a cop-out. Sometimes we can apologize because that's all we got. Well, that's not good enough. I think an apology with some activity is what needs to go hand in hand. So I think what we've got to do is cap in hand, because obviously when you start, like my next point will be dealing with the facts, but once you start dealing with the facts, there may be some bad news for the client. And that might come by way of, look, I just want to, understand what your situation is. I understand how you feel, that it's not a very happy place, but if you were to take a look at the specifications, you'll see here that, I've made it clear in the exclusions that we don't include landscaping or what have you. Like, there's got to be some empathy that's applied, in the apology, especially if it isn't directly a result of what you have or haven't done, and it maybe is an oversight or a misunderstanding on the part of the client. And it's like an apology might be, look, I'm really sorry that it has come to this and you feel this way, but I just want to direct you to the paperwork, that's spelled out in the specifications, that really talks to you, talks about the inclusions or the exclusions or whatever the case may be. So I think there's an apology which is really more so, more empathetic than I'm sorry, I'm begging for your mercy. It's not that way. It's really whenever we miss the boat as far as delivering construction services at the highest level, which is what we talk about, or delivering that top shelf experience or that white glove VIP type experience where we're trying to re-engineer the client's experience, and that goes awry and we don't end up, the client doesn't feel like we've delivered that. We're very apologetic that we haven't hit the mark. However, this is, this is, and then you might go ahead and redirect them to the paperwork that really spells out what the builder's obligation is, or, what we're prepared to do, or whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, an apology is super, super important. And it's a great way, I think, to segue into my next point, which is dealing with the facts. So I think if you can really, I guess, humanize your approach, you want to, deconstruct that. Well, it's us versus them, because I'm telling you, when it goes into a full-blown dispute where there's just a massive tug of war, all that's happening is the knot is getting tighter, and the chances of a quick or a swift or a prompt outcome it starts to erode. The opportunity starts to erode. So once we've got through empathizing with the client and really understanding, 2 ears, 1 mouth, hear what they've got to say, we've done a fairly accurate assessment. Now we've got to start dealing with the facts, is where this is the segue into, okay, so the point in contention is this. Well, according to the documentation that's, forms part of the contract, this is why we haven't included that in. Now, if it's that black and white, this shouldn't be a very long process. Matter of fact, this could be sorted out in 1 or 2 emails. But if the facts are a little bit grey, or a little bit, diluted or inconsistent or inadequate, then this is where you're going to have the he said, she said kind of argument, and this is where it now starts to go down a different rabbit hole. Because if you're dealing with the facts, and it's easy to spell out timelines and communications and authorizations and approvals and paperwork, and there's some precedent that's been set, then obviously it's a lot more black and white. However, where you go into, and let's say that you or me as the builder have not paid attention to our systemized approach to making notes in our CRM, or gaining written approvals by way of change orders, and we've just jumped straight to ordering and executed on the back end and done the work, this is where it starts to become, well, because clients, unfortunately, they always want something for nothing. Like, if they can get more out of you than what they've paid, everybody loves a deal. In some cases, clients will misconstrue, or they will twist the truth somewhat, to be able to help it lean in their favor, to give them leverage to help, get something for nothing. And that's where it gets terribly offensive, because I would say that most of the audience right now are good, law-abiding citizens that don't wish to rip anybody off or short-circuit the system or the program. And it's very offensive when you know that you're a person of integrity, and then when someone accuses you of doing that or starts to twist the truth to make it sound, to bias it in their favor, all of a sudden, the hairs on the back of our neck stand up, and then we start growing horns and claws, because we're like, no, you've got this all wrong. That is not the truth. And so whenever there is this kind of very gray area where the client might be starting to dive into the shadows because they know they can cast doubt on the dispute, that's where it becomes more challenging for you and I. So dealing with the facts is almost not an option, because you've got nothing that is factual, that is categoric. And I've said this before, that if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And so before you go and commit to anything, I think whether that means there's a financial outlay, or whether there's, where you go and engage services of sub-trades or whatever the case may be. If you're a contractor working for a general, I would advise that you don't make a move until you get a purchase order. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of controversy that's created off the back of an argument, because it's like, well, he told me. Well, it's not good enough. It ain't in writing. It doesn't exist. So back when I was running a fairly large crew of 15 guys, the superintendents, and I worked for 3 or 4 of them, they knew protocol. I knew protocol. They knew protocol. They knew that they weren't going to get me to move a muscle. I wouldn't even fire the truck up unless I had a PO in my inbox that I could print out. That was an approved purchase order for the scope of work. And conversely, if they asked me to do an extra on site, unless it was small and I was happy to take the risk, or I was happy to do it for free, I would just say, look, mate, you're going to have to get the office to email me a purchase order. Simple as that. And so as general contractors, if one of our GCs has one of their subcontractors say to them, for the record, as Smith & Sons, we have the ability, if they're in the office, to be able to generate a quote generate a purchase order for you, the subcontractor, in accordance with a quote that you might have given them. And that purchase order actually becomes that's dollars. That literally is currency for you. Without it, you don't have any guarantees. And so, I think if you're general contractors and you're trying to deal with the facts, but there are none, then you've got yourself a heck of a deal to try and resolve this dispute and get something out of it. Because honest to God, you really are going to have trouble, because if the client, and this is why I say it with respect, that buyers can be liars. Now, that can happen both in the sales process, but it also can happen in the construction process if it suits the client. They will skirt the truth to really hoodwink you or to pull the wool over your eyes, which is really, it's very dissatisfying to know that there might be humans out there. But I'm telling you, you're dealing with emotional homeowners for more often than not, or you're dealing with prudent business owners who will work a loophole if they can. And so, the business world would be full of stories where, lawyers have worked loopholes when there was something executed in good faith, which was now reneged on. And really, unfortunately, in this day and age, and I learned this probably a long time ago now, at least 10, 15 years ago, is that if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And that's because the trust in the building industry, it almost doesn't exist. I think there's close-knit groups, but even still, there can be betrayals, there can be things that go sideways, and all of a sudden dealing with the facts is almost impossible. So I think you've got to understand, if you can, in your mind, you can start thinking about between here where I am right now and doing a deal, there is gates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gates. And we must go through each of those gates before we can arrive at a deal. And so I think, because let's say you go through all those gates and the job is delivered and you've got a happy customer and you've got a video testimonial, well, job done. Everything we talked about, delivering, construction services at the highest level, tick. Re-engineering the client experience, tick, we've done that. But in the event that we fail to reach that outcome, it will be fairly self-evident that we skirted around some gates. We jumped the fence in through instead of going through the gate. We didn't get approvals from the client. We didn't get those signed authorities, those sorts of things. In some cases, I would ask for change orders to be paid for in advance before I placed an order, because I am a little bit nervous about, and it says it in our contract that we are in the position to ask for those change order payments up front. So that, again, it's written into a contract. So, I think, but in some cases, general contractors can have, let's say, building agreements or contracts for services that they're not even familiar with some of those, some of the clauses that are written into their own contracts. I know in ours that, it says that, there's got to be invoices that are due upon receipt. Well, if one of my GCs gets a payment without producing an invoice, they're in breach of their own fixed price building contract. And yet this happens in my organization when it should not. But boy, oh boy, it's sort of hard to wrangle some of these GCs at times. And so I think there's some times where, if you go and you've got change order policy written into your contract and you don't then go and produce a change order to be authorized and signed off by the client, and you don't get the payment, maybe 50% down for change order, it's really, you've created this gray area. So dealing with the facts is very difficult. Because you can, on one hand, making rules in the way of a contract is one thing, but then enforcing the rules is certainly another challenge. And so, dealing with the facts. And so what you've got to do is you've got to always be operating to think, okay, this client relationship that I have, which is fine and dandy, blue skies and lollipops, it could become cloudy, it could become stormy. So everything that I do from here on through to completion, where I've got a very happy client, it needs to be documented. It needs to be tracked. Anytime I've had a conversation with a client on the phone, I then follow up with an email and just go, just to make it clear, Mr. Homeowner, I just want to make sure that this is what we discussed and this is the action that I'm going to be taking. Is that okay with you? Can you please respond in the affirmative? And I get them to come back to me with an email. Yeah, Max, that was great conversation today. Everything you says here on the email makes sense. Cheers. Like, boom, at least I've got something to even start the ball rolling, and then I'll follow it up with a change order, which essentially is initially a quote for services. And then I'll actually, when they accept that, I will then actually have them sign that, and I will have a hard copy. It's just the way it's got to roll. Okay, so no matter how it goes with dealing with the facts, and let's say you've really, you've left yourself open and you were vulnerable, and there, or there were some good things that you did. We'll say, hey, we had all of these facts stacked up, A, B, C, D, that really confirmed, and we got a judgment, in our favor, and we didn't have to pay out those damages or whatever the case may be. Conversely, if you go, we didn't have, this, that, or the other sign, and we didn't get those approvals, or we jumped the gun, in one area, then you got to gather those facts together in as part of your conclusion to this episode or to this, event in your business life. And you have to really do a debrief on that whole event, looking at what happened in that dispute resolution program or process, but also the facts that either were there or were not there. And in the event that they weren't there and it cost you, a judgment, essentially, then you need to be able to sort of analyze, what is it that we didn't do? What is it that we didn't take care of? What do we need to add to our checklist? What do we need to add to our, our handbook, our standard operating procedures, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, again, go back to where I started. If you're a small business, this would be just like a massive overkill, because it really wasn't until I started having a bigger business with more humans that I start getting disputes. Because I wasn't there and able to control every single thing that happened within the business. I was relying on people using the systems. Now, if there was a blind side or something happened, it'll be one or both. It'll either be it wasn't on a checklist, it wasn't systemized, and or the human didn't pay attention to the system, and all of a sudden we have a dispute. And so, I think it's important that we do, we suggest that builders do this. In our cost engineering, we call it back costing. So what we're doing is we're analyzing, what we allowed for the budget, and then what did we actually spend. That's where I'm doing essentially a project finance debrief. Well, what I want to do is when we have a conclusion to a dispute, good and bad, I actually want to go back in there and do a bit of a debrief, and I really want to check the boxes, that of the things that we did well, and then I really want to make sure that we have the ability to be able to analyze where we dropped the ball or where we fumbled the ball, and what we can do better next time around. So, look, I really appreciate your time. Again, just to go through that again, point number one, you've got to breathe, set the tone, and really balance or stabilize your own emotions. Emotion down, ability to make a decision goes up. Number 2 is you've got to do an assessment. You've got to be like the FAA in the States. Whenever there's an aircraft that crashes, you've got to go in there and do assessment. You've got to talk to some witnesses. You've got to get accounts. You've got to find the black box. You need to be able to put together what was the series of events and how did this happen. You then, point number 3 is an apology. Really, an apology in brackets, empathy. You want to empathize. In the back of your mind, this is not my fault. I'm going to be able to prove that, I didn't authorize that or it wasn't in the specifications, whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, we apologize that we've had to, get to this point. And maybe it saddens you as a building operator that you've had to reach this. But an apology is certainly a pivotal moment or a moment in time that can really set the foundation, because at that point I've still got genuine care for the client that there was, a misunderstanding or there wasn't clarity in my delivery or whatever the case may be. And certainly an apology is no excuse for dealing with it going forward. It's just like, I just need to clear the air to get started in the resolution phase. So an apology is super important. And then the 4th thing is that we've got to deal with the facts. So once we've done the assessment, obviously we've now got to deal with the facts, and it might be a mixture of all the above. It could be all in your favor because you have the appropriate documentation, authorizations. It could be all in the client's favor where you cannot produce anything, but then there might be something in the middle as well where there's going to be some overlap or some gray area between maybe an email that was sent which was misunderstood, between you and the client. That might have really, brought or created a series of events after that. And so I think it's about making sure that you can disseminate the fact and really cop on the chin when you actually didn't get that approval, when you've said that you did, and you may have got that verbally, but if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So even if you say that XYZ client did say that to me, it's going to be really hard because the judge or the arbitrator, whoever's going to, oversee the case, they are going to want paperwork. And so you just got to always be focusing on the facts. And if you haven't got it, you need to put your you need to put your helmet on and your mouth guard in because it's about to get a little bit rugged. So, and then of course the final thing is conclude. You want to conclude the dispute as quickly as you can. You don't want this thing to distract you, take all your good creative energy out that you need to run your business, talk to your clients, deal with your team and your subs, etc. So you really want to resolve this as quickly as you can because it does take a toll on you as a person, your emotion, and of course your creative, which is what you need a lot of to run, a successful construction company. And of course you want to do a debrief and you really want to go, we really, really did this badly. And I mean, that's the best thing you can say because once you've taken responsibility for the cock up, you then own the rights to the solution. And so what you're doing is this whole plan, do, check, act, rotation, whereby every day that you come to the office, every day that you hit the building site, there is always opportunity for you to do things better today than what you did yesterday. And more often than not, they're going to be highlighted by what you did yesterday or the week before that really resulted in dispute, because that's how the market highlights whether you're a really good operator or whether if you've got disputes happening on a regular basis around sort of similar things that have a similar tone, i.e. paperwork or authorizations, then you really should sit down and have a serious look at how you go corresponding with clients mid-construction. Do you use written change orders? Do you get authorizations before you go and start ordering materials? Signed authorizations, signed change orders. Like, you got to protect yourselves. You've got to watch your 6 o'clock. You've got to be, looking all around and make sure that you're taking stock of your activities and your actions. And nonetheless, just owning it. You're the boss. You're the owner. Don't say it's not your fault. It's all your fault. Use that to build your business muscles, to improve your systems, to, cull the labor that's not doing its job, and to, enable you to understand what maybe good labor or good team looks like when they do come across your path. Like I said, like, share, and subscribe. Really appreciate, your comments. Really appreciate your love on emails. Be sure to email me, max@businessforbuilders.ca. Would love to help out any way I could. What we've got coming up is, a little bit of stuff that's going to be a little bit different, and hopefully it's going to help you in the future. So go build a kick-ass business. See you on the next episode. Cheers.